Welcome to The Explainer. We're jumping straight into a highly alarming security incident that literally just unfolded right on the doorstep of the White House. Look, we're going to bypass all the online speculation today and look directly at the hard facts on the ground to figure out exactly what just happened.
Okay, let's dive into this. To truly grasp the sheer chaos of this moment, check out what CBS News reporter Aaron Navarro had to say. He was standing right on the North Lawn getting ready for a live broadcast when everything kicked off. He reported, you could hear about 20 to 30 gunshots at points sounding like they were coming from different guns. I mean, just imagine that for a second. You're standing outside the executive mansion, setting up your camera, and suddenly, a rapid, deafening succession of gunfire. It absolutely paints a terrifying picture right off the bat.
Section 1. Shots near the White House, breaking down the immediate facts.
So we're going to use the inverted pyramid approach here, giving you the absolute most critical information right up top. This whole thing went down right at the intersection of 17th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue. Now, if you're familiar with DC, you know this is a very specific, highly visible security checkpoint area just outside the White House grounds. According to the official reports, a suspect walked right up to this security post and just opened fire directly at U.S. Secret Service agents. Make no mistake, this booth, it acts as that crucial first line of physical defense before you get anywhere near the actual White House grounds.
Section 2. Casualties and immediate response. The human toll.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how things stand with the casualties. According to law enforcement sources, 2 people were actually hit during this exchange of gunfire and quickly rushed to a local hospital. On one side, the suspect was apprehended by authorities and is currently listed in critical condition. On the other hand, a second individual, who reporters on the ground are describing as a possible bystander, is currently in serious condition.
As you'd expect, the response from law enforcement was incredibly fast. I mean, this is exactly what they train for. When the Secret Service agents were fired upon, they successfully returned fire, and the entire scene was contained super quickly. And, just to emphasize the absolute severity of a breach like this, FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed over on X that the FBI is already heavily involved. They're on the scene and actively investigating the situation as we speak.
Section 3. Reporters duck for cover. The chaos on the North Lawn.
Let's walk through this timeline together, because it really captures that crazy shift from a completely standard evening news cycle to a high-security lockdown. Within literal seconds of hearing those 20 to 30 shots, reporters stationed out at the covered live shot tents, the area they call Pebble Beach, they had to physically duck for cover. Almost simultaneously, Secret Service officers started screaming, "Get inside, get inside." Minutes later, armed agents are rushing the press corps indoors, and for the next 30 minutes, complete lockdown. Journalists were locked inside the press briefing room while heavily armed officers roamed the North Lawn to secure that perimeter.
Section 4. Where was the president? Mapping the distance.
Okay, to really understand the proximity of this threat, let's visualize the physical space here. Step 1 is the checkpoint at 17th and Pennsylvania Ave, where the shooting actually happened. Moving to Step 2, you go past the press gates. Step 3 takes us right past the West Wing. And finally, Step 4 is the White House residence. President Trump was confirmed to be inside the residence at the time of the shooting. Now, reporters noted that this physical distance is roughly equivalent to about 1 or 2 city blocks. That's close. However, there are still some pretty critical details that remain unconfirmed. We actually don't know specifically what room the president was in when the shooting started. We also don't know if he could even hear the gunfire. Now, sure, the distance and those heavily fortified walls of the residence might have muffled the noise, but reporters outside made a point of noting that those rapid rounds were incredibly loud and distinct.
Section 5. A city on edge. Recent historical context.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why tensions in Washington are so incredibly high right now. When we compare tonight's incident to last month's, well, the pattern is alarming, to say the least. Look at tonight. It occurred outside a checkpoint, the suspect was apprehended and is in critical condition, and crucially, the motive is entirely unknown. Compare that to a highly terrifying event from less than a month ago, where shots were actually fired inside the White House Correspondents' Dinner. In that prior incident, the suspect was actually charged with an attempted assassination of President Trump. Now, obviously, we are just impartially reporting the facts of both events from our sources here, but it's absolutely vital to understand this context. This is the second major security scare involving gunfire at or near the White House in just a few short weeks. Now, despite the sheer terror of tonight's shooting, there were actually a few key factors that stopped this from turning into a much, much deadlier scene. First off, this specific checkpoint is right next to a very busy intersection. We're talking a Starbucks, fast casual restaurants, the whole shebang. But because it happened on a weekend evening, the foot traffic and the crowds were significantly lighter than they'd be on a typical weekday. On top of that, a press lid had already been called. That basically means the president wasn't expected to make any more public appearances today. Because of that lid, a ton of staffers and journalists had already packed up and gone home, leaving far fewer people in harm's way.
Section 6. The scene now. A lockdown capital.
BBC reporter Emma McCarthy painted this really vivid sensory picture of the immediate aftermath. Right now, the surrounding streets are entirely shut down, completely cordoned off by police tape. She actually described the corner of 18th and Pennsylvania as a, quote, sea of blue and red police lights. It's just this massive convergence of local media, international outlets, growing crowds of onlookers, and dozens upon dozens of police vehicles. And all of that is standing out starkly against what is otherwise a very cold, wet Washington, D.C. evening. Which brings us to our final thought. The motive behind tonight's shooting at the checkpoint remains entirely unknown. But looking at all the data we've covered today, it begs a critical, really provocative question. How will the Secret Service adjust its first line of defense after 2 major security breaches in a single month? It's a question of paramount importance for the safety of the Capitol, the press corps, and the President of the United States. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer to break down the facts. Keep your eyes on the ongoing investigation, stay curious, and we'll catch you next time.